Hey, what's up everyone, Julian here, hope you're all good and welcome back to part 2 of this MongoDB and Python series where we're going to be picking up where we left off in the last episode. In this episode we're going to be looking more at saving documents and doing some basic querying of the database. Now querying in MongoDB is pretty powerful. There's lots of different ways to query the database and things can get quite advanced, but I think in this episode we're just going to cover the basics and I think it's going to be enough to get you guys up and running. So let's head over to the demo here. So I've got a terminal running with MongoDB running in the background and another terminal window here with our file which is main.py, and this is where we left things last time. We imported everything up the top, we connected to the database using the connect function, and we defined a couple of documents and did some basic saving of documents to the database. So what I want to touch on first is a bit of a different way to save documents. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and copy this and paste it down here. And what I'm going to do is just for now is go ahead and comment these out. So in the last episode, this is how we saved the document. We created a new variable and we called the user class, which is the name of our collection here. And then we passed in some values and then called the .save method on the class. But what I'm going to do is go ahead and delete the .save and I'm going to take out admin equals true, because there's a slightly different way that we can save documents to the database. So there's going to be times where you want to create an instance of this class, but you don't necessarily want to save it straight away. And you may have more processing to do. Maybe you've got a couple of functions you want to call which are going to return some values, and you don't necessarily want to put them all in here, or maybe you're waiting on some kind of other response before you actually go ahead and save this document to the database. So what we can do is, just like a normal class, we can kind of set attributes. So we can do user admin equals true. And if we take a look, what else have we got? We've got registered, so we could add that as well. So we could do user.registered equals true. I keep spelling true wrong. Then we can call user.save. And just like that, we're able to add extra attributes onto our user class and then call save at a later time. So this is really useful, and that's because John Doe is a, well, in fact, let's run this because I want to show you guys the error. So if we go Python main.py, and you can see here we get a not unique error. So let's go ahead and change this. Peter Pan, and what can we write for his bio? I'm forever young. Right, so let's go and save Peter Pan to our database. And there we go. Let's check out Compass here. We go and refresh on the user collection, head down to the bottom, and there we go, we got Peter Pan. And something I probably should have mentioned, I did go ahead and create a few more users and a few more blog posts. And all I did was just change the title, and for the user I just changed their username and email, and I think I changed the bio as well. So we've got a few more users and blog posts because we're going to be querying the database. So you can see here we've called the .save method on the user variable rather than here, and that allows us to add attributes further along in our code, so that's really useful. And of course, if we try to run that again, we're going to get that same not unique error. So how can we handle that? Well, we can do a try except. So if we wrap the .save in a try except, and we can see here the exception that Mongo Engine is raising is a not unique error. So we can just borrow that exception and we can go ahead and catch it and print username or email is not unique, for example. So now if we try and run this, we're catching that not unique error and then just printing out username or email is not unique. So that's just something to be aware of. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that out for now, or comment that out for now, and we will move on to querying the database. So like I said, there's lots of ways to query the database. We've got lots of options with Mongo Engine. I'm going to show you some of the basic stuff in this episode. So, querying an entire collection. We can do users equals user, so the name of the collection, and then we call the .objects method. And what this is going to do is just return every document in the users collection. So let's print users and see how it looks. Let's clear the terminal and run it. And you can see here we've got this list-like object with all of the individual user objects inside. And this is what's called a query set object, or just a query set. And we can kind of just treat it like a list, so we can iterate through it. So let's go ahead and do that now. So let's do for user in users, print. And then what we can do is access all of the attributes of the individual user objects. So we could do user.username, user.email, and user.bio. So let's run this and see what we get. So there we go, we get all of our users where we're iterating through and accessing the individual attributes using the dot notation here. So user.username, user.email, and user.bio. So really easy way to quickly get a result from the database just using the .objects method. That's going to return everything in the collection that you specify. So what about if we want to get an individual? So we could do, well in fact, before we get an individual, let's look at some more filtering. So the .objects is just going to return everything, and the .objects method we can pass in keyword arguments which are going to apply a filter to our query. So for example, we could do admin users. Let's say we want to get all the users who have admin as true. We can do user.objects admin equals true. And then we can do for a in admin users print a.username, for example. Let's go ahead and run that. So there we go. We've got 4 admin users out of our 6 here. And that's a way that we can use filtering in the objects method here. So really, really useful. Another thing we could do is provide even more keywords here. So we could do registered also equals true. And if we go and run that again, oh, I spelled true wrong. I keep spelling true wrong. What's wrong with me? And if we run that again, now we can see Peter Pan and Jane Doe are the only documents that match admin and registered being true. So that's how we can use filtering in our queries to return very specific results. So I'm going to go ahead and comment that out for now. So what about if we want to get an individual? And this is going to be really useful if you're querying for a document that you know that is going to be unique. So for example, let's say you want to look up a user by their username or email. In our schema here, we know that we've set the username to unique and the email to unique. So how do we go about doing that? So let's get John Doe from our database. So we can do John Doe equals user.objects, and then we're going to pass in username John Doe, and then we can call the .get method. And what this is going to do is just return a single document. So now what we can do is print John Doe.username. We go ahead and run this. There we go. We get John Doe, and we could do John Doe.email. Run that again. And there we go, we get John Doe and jdoe@gmail.com. So use the .get method when you want to get a unique result. However, if we tried to run this with a username that we know doesn't exist in the database, so Tinkerbell, if we try and run this, we get this error. We get a does not exist error. So again, we could do something like try accept, and then we can use this does not exist error. We can use that to catch the error, and we can go ahead and print user not found. And of course we need to get rid of that because it's going to throw an error. And if we run that, there we go, we get user not found, and that's because we're trying to call the get method on an object that doesn't exist, or on a query that is returning false. So use.get when you know something is going to be unique in the database. So this is quite useful for when you're doing something like looking up a user by their email or username. Let's say you've got some kind of user management. You might want to try and do something like, you know, user, and then this username variable, maybe you're taking some data from a form, stick that in there and call the get method. And if you catch it, then you can go ahead and, you know, return something to the user, like, you know, invalid credentials. However, if they do exist, then maybe you can go and validate password. So that's how we use the .get method. So let's go ahead and comment this out. If we take a look at our schema here in blog posts, you can see that we've got author here as a reference field, and it's a reference field to the user collection. And what that means is that whenever we've created a blog post, and if we take a look here in Compass and take a look at the blog post connection, we can see we've got author set as object ID. So what we can do is actually query the blog post collection with a user ID to, you know, get a blog post that was written by a specific author. So let's take a look at how this is going to work. So we know John Doe has written a few articles, so let's go ahead and get John Doe. User objects.get, and let's go ahead and pass in username is John Doe. So we know John Doe's in the database, so we can use the .get. And then what we're going to do is go ahead and posts, and this will be all of the blog posts that John Doe has authored. So we call blog post dot objects because, again, blog post is the name of the collection that we're querying, and we use the objects method here to actually query it. And let's go ahead and pass in author equals John Doe. And because we've set this variable, this John Doe variable here as an actual document, what we're doing is essentially just passing in a document here. And because we've got our author field set as a reference field, it's going to work. So let's go ahead and we can do for post in posts print post.author.username. Let me clear the terminal and go ahead and run this. And there we go, we can see all of the posts that were authored by John Doe. And because the author field in blog post is a reference field to another document, you notice that I was able to use this dot notation to access fields on the author. So this is why it's really, really powerful and really useful. So that's how you can query the database using another document or a reference to another document. So let's move on. I'm going to go ahead and comment this out. Another thing we can do is use some query operators, and there's absolutely loads of query operators. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy a link here because I want to show you guys the oh, I think we're actually already open. Okay, so query operators, what are they? So sometimes we're going to need to query the database, you know, for things like less than, greater than or equal to, not in. So we can do things like we can query to see if a string or a value is in a list. We can query to only get documents that have a certain value less than or greater than or equal to, or if the field or if a value for a field even exists. And we can also do some string queries as well. So these are incredibly powerful and what makes a database really useful, because you're able to do queries at the database level and do all sorts of filtering. Query operators. So the first we're going to look at is less than and greater than. So let's, if we take a look at our schema, we know that our users have an age field set. And if we take a quick look in Compass here, we can see we've got a few different ages. So John Doe is 32, Jane Doe is 27, Fubar is 20, Guido is 45, Armin is 34, and Peter Pan is 32. Probably a bit old for Peter Pan. But anyway, I digress. So why don't we query and ask for a result of users younger than 30, for example. So we'll just call it young users equals user.objects. And then what we can do is pass in our query operators here into the objects method. And we do that with the following syntax. So the first thing we enter is the field that we're querying for, followed by a double underscore, and then followed by the query operator that you want to use. So in our case, we're going to use LT, which stands for less than, and then an equals, and then the value that you kind of want to check against. So if we look here in the docs, LT is less than. So we're calling basically find us any of the users that have an age less than 30. So let's go ahead and for user in young users, we'll go ahead and print the user.username and then the user.age, like so. Then if we go ahead and run this, so Fubar and Jane Doe are the only users in our user collection here with an age younger than 30. However, if we were to change this to 40, for example, we see here we get some more. And if we take this up to 50, there we go, we get even more. So this is how we can use query operators in our queries. And just remember, it's the field that you want to query against, followed by a double underscore, and then the actual query operator that you want to use. So let's comment this out. And in fact, I think I'll just, I'll reuse this because I want to do another query. So let's go older users, and rather than use less than, we can do GTE, which stands for greater than or equal to. Again, if we take a look in the docs, we've got GTE and we got loads, you know, we've got greater than, we've got less than or equal to, obviously we've got less than, we've got NE, which is not equal. So pretty much the standard operators that you're used to working with in Python are going to work in these queries here. So let's do greater than or equal to 30. Let's change this young users variable to the older users, and let's go ahead, I'm going to clear, and we'll go ahead and run that. And here we go, we're getting back all of our users that match this query. So any user with an age greater than 30 is being returned. So that's how we can use query operators here, and I think that's all I'm going to show you for now, but I think you guys get the idea. So really, really powerful. And because we're doing this at the database level, it's much quicker than if, for example, if you were to go ahead and query all of the users. So for example here, if you were to go ahead and, you know, get a query set of all of the users and then use Python, you know, for example, you could do for user in users, if user.age, you know, we could do greater than 30, for example, then maybe you want to go ahead and do something else with that user. Or maybe you've got a, you know, older users is a list, then you could do something like older users dot append user. But, you know, A, this is way more code than we need to write, and two, it's probably going to be slower. So it's going to be quicker to let the database handle the filtering, and, you know, it's way more, it's just easier to read, faster to write, less code, and less code is always a good thing. And of course you could use a list comprehension there and do some filtering as well, but you guys get the idea, you know what I'm saying. So what other things can we do? We can query a list. So query a list. We can do, for example, if we take a look at our blog post here, we haven't defined it in the schema because this is a dynamic document, but if we take a look at when we actually created the blog posts, all of them were created with this tags list. So let's go ahead and comment that out and maybe take a quick look in Atlas at our blog posts. And we can see here all of our blog posts do have a list here. So we've got Python, MongoDB and Mongo Engine in all of the posts. So let's say we've got some kind of blog and we want users to be able to check out all of the different blog posts which are tagged with Python, for example, or maybe tagged with MongoDB. Well, that again is something that's very easy to do. So that's posts tagged Python equals, again, the name of the collection, then objects. So you'll notice that we use the objects method to do all of our querying. And then it's really nice because then we could just provide these filters into the objects method. So really, really simple. So what we can do, if we want to query a list, we can just enter the name of the list that we want to query. In our case, it's tags equals, and then we can throw in the string that we're querying for or the value that we're querying for. Now we can do for post in post tag Python. Let's go ahead and print post dot content post dot tags. And let's see what we get. Oh, hang on. Okay, let's try that again. Moving too fast. Okay, probably hasn't turned out very well, but let's just go ahead and delete those. Okay, so all of the posts that are tagged with Python, and because they all are, yeah, this is happening. So that's how we would query a list. And let's do something that we know isn't in the list. Mongo isn't in there. We try and do that, we get no results. But however, if we change that to MongoDB, boom, there we go. So that's how you query to see if something is in a list. It's literally just the name of the field which contains the list, in our case it's tags, followed by a string of whatever you want to query, or not even a string, maybe a value, it depends what the list contains. I also think you can, if you've got multiple values here, you can do something like this. You can go tags, double underscore, and then the in keyword. And let's just try this. I want to see if it works. Okay, no, that didn't work because I think you have to provide a list here. So let's try this. Okay, that works. So we know that our tags have MongoDB and Python. There we go. Okay, that's awesome. Let's go, let's just put something that we know isn't tagged. Okay, and that's because MongoDB is still in there. So if you've got a list, then that's how you would query it as well. But if you've just got a single value, you can just use the name of the field, which contains a list, followed by a value there. So that's how you can query a list. Let's go ahead and comment that out. How about string queries? So string queries are really, really powerful and extremely useful. So we can see here we've got a few different options, and maybe I need to make this a bit bigger. So we can query just kind of like what we did with the querying the list. We can query for an exact value. For an exact value which is case insensitive, if a string contains a value, if a string contains value which is also case insensitive, starts with case insensitive, ends with blah blah blah. So loads of different string queries which are really useful for us to use. So string queries, how do we do it and why would we want to? So let's say, for example, you've got your blog and you've got a search function, and maybe you want to allow someone to search your blog for a certain post. Maybe we want to search the post title, or we want to search the content for a certain keyword. So what we can do is, let's do something like Python posts equals blog post dot objects again. And then what we can do is, the first thing we need to provide is the field that we want to search. So if we take a look at our blog post, we've got title, we've got content. So why don't we go ahead and search the content. Content, double underscore, because we are using a query operator here. And then why don't we take a quick look at the docs, and why don't we go for IContains. So what this is going to do is search the content field and try and perform some kind of match on a case insensitive string. So let's go ahead and throw IContains equals and then the value that we want to search. So let's search for Python. And in fact, maybe we should take a quick look at some of the content here. So in fact, yeah, all of the content is the same for all the posts. So yeah, we're going to get a few results if we search for, you know, Python or MongoDB, but let's do it anyway. So let's go ahead and for post in Python posts, print post.content. So let's clear the terminal and run this again. And there we go. We're getting back all of these results because we've got a match here with Python. However, if we were to change this to something like Flask and run that again, then we don't get any matches because our content fields of our blog post do not contain the word Flask anywhere. So IContains is a really, really powerful tool. So you probably in the real world, you wouldn't want to search all of the content of all of your blog posts. You know, a blog post can contain thousands of individual characters, so this would probably be quite a lengthy search. But for something like a title, so why don't we change this from content to title, because again, let's take a look at our field here. Title was one of the fields that we've got in our blog posts, and probably something that you're more likely to want to search in a real life database or scenario. So let's go ahead and what do we have as our title? So we've got, okay, so it's my third blog post, my fourth blog post, for example. So why don't we do fourth? Because we know we've got a post with the word fourth in the title somewhere. So let's go ahead and run this. Okay, and we get one. And maybe we can change this from content to title and have a look. And there we go, we get a match for the word fourth using IContains. And just to illustrate the difference with IContains and contains, we try and run that again, that matches. But if we have a capital and try and run that again, then we don't get a match. So depending on how you want to use it, you can use contains or IContains or any of these other string methods here, or not string methods, these string queries. So really, really powerful. So let's cover some more querying of the database. Limiting and skipping results. So let's say we want to get the first. What we can do is, why don't we go for create a new variable called first, and let's query the blog post. And of course we need to use objects, but then we can chain on another method, the first method. And what that's going to do is print first.title, for example. What this is going to do, the first method is just going to return the first document in that collection. So there we go, we get my fifth blog post because that, if we take a look, is the first one because we've ordered our collection in reverse order. So that's how you can use the dot first, which is quite useful. You know, maybe on your blog page you want to have at the top, maybe it's your big featured article, which is the first one, so you can use dot first. So that's using the first method. How about if we want to maybe skip some results or get a certain number of results from a collection? So let's say if we want to get the first two documents, we can use the kind of Python slicing syntax. So let's do first two equals blog post dot objects, and then we can use a slice. So I can do :2 for post in first two print post.title, and then we go ahead and run this. There we go. We're getting the first two documents in the blog post collection. And if you wanted, for example, to get all but the first two, you could do, let's just create a new variable, all but blog post dot objects, and then we can do a very similar thing, but we do a 2 and then a colon rather than a colon and 2. So we can do for post in all but print post.title. We go ahead and run this. Boom. We get the rest of our posts excluding the first two. And how about if we want to take a slice of our collection? What we can do is, I'm just going to call this sliced equals blog post dot objects, and then what we can do is maybe we want the second to fourth. What we can do for post in sliced print post.title. Let me clear the terminal. Let's go ahead and run that. And there we go. So now we're taking a slice. So this is going to be really useful if you're doing some kind of pagination. So let's say you only want to, let's say you've got hundreds of blog posts, but you only want to display 20 at a given page or on a given page. You can use slicing here to only slice, 20 documents from within a certain range. So this is how slicing is really useful. So let's look at a few more things and then we're going to wrap things up. So I think what we're going to do is cover maybe some counting. So what we can do, we can count results. So for example, we can do user count, and let's say we just want to count the amount of user documents in the user collection. So we do user.objects.count, and we go ahead and print user count, and we've got 6 users. So really nice if you just, you don't necessarily want to bring in a whole query set and then, call something like len user count. You can just use the .count method here. So really, really useful. We can do some aggregation, which again is going to be really useful. And if we take a look at our blog posts here, we can see we've got this rating field. So we've got rating 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So let's say we want to do something like get the average rating of all of our blog posts. So we can do average equals blog post dot objects, and then actually rather than call the method on objects, we call average, and then we pass in the field that we want to average. So in our case it was rating. So let's go ahead and print average. So we can see here the database is doing the hard work and Mongo Engine is returning us a average of whatever field we pass it. So that again is really, really useful. Another thing we can do, we can use Mongo Engine to sum a value for us. So let's do total rating equals blog post dot objects, and then we call the .sum method. And again, we pass in the field that we want to sum together. And we can do print total rating. Let's go ahead and run this. And you can see here that the sum method has summed together all of those values and returned it nicely for us. So I think that's going to wrap this up for this episode. It's going on a bit longer than I intended, but I hope you found it useful. In fact, one thing we didn't do was actually call this method here. So maybe we can quickly do that if we can get a reference to one of our users. Let's jump down at the bottom here and do it. So I know this is a bit off topic, but it's something I didn't show you in the last episode. So let's go ahead and get John Doe user dot objects dot get, and to the objects method, username equals John Doe. And then what I'm going to do is just print johndoe.json and call the method. And if we run that, you can see here we are calling this JSON method, which is one that we've defined here up in our class. And it's creating a dictionary with a few of the values and returning that as a JSON string. And you can see here, this is how easy it is to create a method and call it on a user object. So that's going to wrap it up for this one. Sorry it's gone on a bit longer than I intended, but thank you very much for sticking around and hanging on. I hope you found it useful. If you've got any questions or comments, do leave them below. If there's anything I missed, then again, be sure to let me know. But like I said, this is just an introduction and it's not really covering the advanced queries, and I think we'll look into that in another episode. So thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.